You know, I gotta be honest with you. I've been staring at these files for, 3 hours now? And I still can't quite figure out if I'm looking at a history book, a conspiracy theory, or, I don't know, a glitch in reality.
It is unsettling.
It really is. Usually when we do these deep dives, I have a clear narrative in my head, a beginning, a middle, an end. We know who the bad guys were, who won the dates, but this is something else entirely.
It is. It feels less like we're reviewing history and more like we're walking into a room that's just been scrubbed down with bleach.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You can smell the chemicals, you know something happened there, but all the visual evidence is just gone.
That is the perfect description. We're looking at this specific cache of documents, the so-called texto colado files.
Right.
And for anyone not brushing up on their Portuguese, that translates roughly to pasted text or collated text. And honestly, that's exactly what this looks like. It's not some neat official report. It's a messy scrapbook of leaked PDFs and corrupted audio logs and memos that look like they were pulled out of a shredder.
And that context is absolutely vital. These aren't documents that were released under, Freedom of Information Act. These are files that leaked.
They were never meant to be seen.
Exactly. And because of that, they give us a window into a historical anomaly that technically shouldn't exist. We're looking at a conflict, a full-scale military engagement with heavy artillery, troop movements, the works that officially ended, but it has no treaty.
Okay, stick a pin in that, because my brain just refuses to accept it. How do you have a war that ends without a treaty?
Well,
or at least a surrender? Or a mission accomplished banner? I mean, we are talking about thousands of people involved here. You can't just ghost a war.
It seems, according to the Texto Colado source material, that is exactly what happened. There is no declaration of victory, there is no admission of defeat, and maybe the most bizarre part of all, there is almost no record explaining why it stopped.
So it didn't just taper off?
No, it didn't resolve. It's like the entire event just evaporated.
So our mission today is a bit different. We aren't here to give a history lesson because, well, the history is missing. We're here to act more like detectives.
Right. The silence is the clue.
Exactly. We need to piece together a narrative from these conflicting sources where the silence itself is the main clue. We're trying to understand how the explanation for an entire war can just disappear.
And to do that, you have to look at the mechanism of the erasure. If you want to hide a war, you have to start with the paperwork. And what stands out immediately in these files is the sheer inconsistency of the archives.
Yeah, I got a headache trying to track this. The source highlights this dual reality. So if you go to one archive, let's say a logistics department's archive, the conflict happened. It's right there in black and white.
Fuel logs, ammunition requests.
Exactly. Movement orders for thousands of troops. But then, if you cross-reference that with the operational archives, or the diplomatic records from the same exact time period, it's nothing. Crickets.
It creates this sense of vertigo. It's like two parallel realities running side by side. In one, trucks are rolling and shells are firing.
In the other.
In the other, those same units are sitting in their barracks conducting routine maintenance.
But surely that's just, isn't that just incompetence? We see that all the time. Government agencies, they don't talk to each other. Maybe someone just lost a box of files in a basement somewhere.
I would love to believe that. I really would. But the evidence points to something much more deliberate. Look at the timeline break. This is one of the most chilling details in the Texto Colado analysis.
Okay.
In a normal conflict, even a poorly recorded one, military records sort of fade away gradually. The war ends, units demobilize, reports get less frequent. It's a bell curve.
Right, the chatter just dies down.
Exactly. But here, the records don't fade. They stop, abruptly. It's a clean break in the timeline. One day there's intense activity radio logs, supply chains running hot, and the very next day, the record simply ceases to exist.
Wow.
It's like someone just pulled the plug on the recording device while the band was still playing.
So that implies a stop order. Not just for the fighting, but for the writing. Someone said, pencils down, right now.
And it gets more active than just stopping. The sources describe instances of retroactive changes. And this, to me, this is the smoking gun that rules out incompetence.
You mean they didn't just stop writing, they went back and edited?
Yes. We aren't just talking about missing files. The sources indicate that governments changed the language retroactively.
Give us an example of that, because that sounds almost Orwellian.
Okay, so the source highlights a specific set of memos. Originally, say, in June of the conflict year, a document was labeled Combat Operations Sector 4.
Right, sounds standard.
3 years later, that same document in the digital archive has been restamped. The header now reads, Training exercise. Simulation Delta. They didn't just hide the document, they went back in and sanitized the metadata.
That is terrifying. It was one thing to lie to the press in the moment, oh no, nothing to see here. But to go back and actively edit the past, to change the justification for moving a tank division from enemy engagement to driver training.
It takes a massive amount of coordination.
It does, and it leads to what the source calls a narrative collapse. Usually, a war has a reason, a casus belli, and it has a resolution.
Yeah.
Here, the justification didn't just change, it vanished. The narrative didn't conclude, it collapsed.
It's like watching a building implode in reverse.
So if the paperwork was scrubbed and the digital logs were altered, what about the people? You can rewrite a PDF, but you can't just delete the memory of a soldier who was actually there.
And that is where the friction is highest. And honestly, this is where the story shifts from being this, weird bureaucratic mystery to a genuine human tragedy.
Because the official reports are just a vacuum.
A total vacuum. They imply nothing happened. But the civilian testimonies found in these leaked files, they contradict that completely.
And we're not talking about vague rumors here. The sources mention specific accounts from locals who describe, deafening noise, ground tremors from artillery, columns of smoke. These people know what they saw.
But then they turn on the news or they look at the official government statement and it's just blue skies. Imagine the gaslighting involved in that.
Oh, it's brutal.
You are standing in the rubble of your own neighborhood and the official record says no planes were even flying that day. It creates a dissonance, that is. It's hard to wrap your head around.
Speaking of dissonance, we have to talk about the ghost unit. Of all the things in these files, this is the one that really stuck with me.
It's the most specific and I think undeniable piece of evidence in the whole dossier.
Okay, so for everyone listening, let me break this down. Official records regarding this conflict state that a specific military unit, we'll call them Unit X, never existed. The government stance is, we have no charter for this group. They were never formed. They don't exist.
Which is a pretty standard denial for, say, a covert ops group.
Right, except for one tiny little problem. The source notes that 12 men from that very unit are currently receiving government-funded medical treatment for injuries they sustained during the time frame of the conflict.
Just let that sink in for a second.
It's unbelievable.
You have a government bureaucracy, which, let's be honest, loves to deny claims to save money, paying out monthly medical support for shrapnel wounds and blast injuries for a dozen men. But on the other side of the building, the operational archives say the unit these men served in is a work of fiction.
It's a logical impossibility that is somehow functioning in the real world. How does the medical board even process a claim for a non-existent war?
They likely use placeholder codes. The source alludes to administrative workarounds. But think about the soldiers themselves. You are one of these 12 men. You have the scars. You wake up with the pain every single day. The government sends you a check to manage that pain, yet that same government will look you in the eye and say, you were never there.
It's like being a living ghost. And it's not just the physical injuries. The sources also talk about the incompatibility of memory.
This is the psychological toll of the erasure. You have veterans whose service records do not match their actual memory.
So they remember the mud, the orders, the specific geography of a battlefield.
But their discharge papers say, stationed at Logistics Hub B, 300 miles away.
And what happens if you try to correct it? If you say, hey, no, I was at the front, you're essentially calling the government a liar while holding a classified document. That's a very dangerous spot to be in.
And many of them were never redeployed. The sources mention soldiers just left in this sort of bureaucratic limbo. If the war didn't officially happen, there's no end of tour date.
There's no victory parade.
You don't get reassigned because technically you aren't doing anything, you just linger.
It's just so tragic. And it extends to the civilians too, doesn't it? We touched on the gaslighting, but there's a financial aspect to this silence.
Absolutely. The discussion in the sources touches on civilians who were never compensated. Legally speaking, you can't claim compensation for damage caused by a non-event.
So if a shell destroys your farm, you file a claim.
But if the government says, we had no artillery in that sector, your claim is rejected. You're left with a destroyed livelihood and zero recourse because the truth has been edited out of existence.
So we have a war that didn't happen, fought by soldiers who weren't there, injuring civilians who can't prove it. The question just screaming in my head is, why? Yeah. Why go to these lengths? Governments admit to mistakes all the time. They admit to failed wars. What makes this one so special that it had to be completely erased?
That is the million-dollar question. And because of the nature of the texto-colado leak, we don't have the answer key. We just don't. But the deep analysis of the sources, it walks through several competing theories. And I want to be really clear. These are theories derived from the shape of the hole in the record. None of them are validated.
Right, we're speculating based on the evidence of the cover-up itself. So one theory the source posits is massive political embarrassment.
The save face theory. Basically, something happened that was so damaging to the reputation of the leadership, maybe a war crime, or a decision so catastrophically stupid that the only survival strategy for the regime was total erasure.
So, like, if they admitted this happened, the government would fall the next day.
Precisely. Or it could be the strategic failure theory. Maybe the operation was a total loss. Maybe they sent in an elite force and they were just wiped out by a superior adversary they didn't even know existed. Admitting the war would mean admitting weakness.
That makes a certain kind of sense. We're not weak because we never fought them. But the source also mentions an intelligence operation that went completely wrong.
This is the blowback scenario. If the conflict was started based on bad, intel-fabricated evidence, or a false flag that went sideways, then the cover-up becomes the primary mission. You aren't fighting the enemy anymore, you're fighting the truth of how the war even started.
But there's one more theory in the file that I found the most intriguing, and honestly the most unsettling. The source calls it a discovery that changed priorities overnight.
Yes. This is the most ambiguous one. The idea that during the conflict something was found, or maybe realized, that made the conflict itself irrelevant, or perhaps dangerous to continue.
That sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie. What could you possibly find in a war zone that makes everyone agree to just stop?
That's the thing. It implies that both sides, if there even were two clear sides, agreed to the silence. Usually the victor writes the history, but here, no one wrote the history. That suggests a mutual agreement to forget. Did they find a resource? Did they trigger something environmental? Did they realize they were fighting the wrong enemy?
It implies a level of cooperation that just seems impossible in war. Hey, let's stop shooting and pretend this never happened. Okay, deal.
Unless the alternative was so much worse.
Yeah.
But again, and this is crucial, the analysis in the sources stresses that none of these theories appear in the official conclusion for a very simple reason.
Because there is no official conclusion.
Exactly. If they gave a reason, even a fake one, that would be a conclusion. It would be an ending. By offering nothing, by leaving the narrative open-ended and erased, they avoid the need to justify anything at all.
It's the ultimate power move. If you don't acknowledge the question, you never have to provide the answer.
And the sources treat all these theories as equally possible and equally incomplete. Without that official keystone to lock the history in place, every theory is just a guess in the dark.
It really highlights how dependent we are on the official story to make sense of the world. Even if we don't believe it, we use it as a baseline to argue against. Here, there isn't even a baseline. We're just floating in this void of data.
That is the discomfort the source material intends to create. It forces you to confront the fact that history is a construct. It is built. It is curated. And if the builders decide to leave a room out of the blueprints, you might never know it was there.
Unless you find the loose bricks.
Unless you find the loose bricks.
And we found a few loose bricks today. The ghost unit with their medical bills. The timeline break where the logs just cut to black. The retroactive stamps on the PDFs.
But we haven't found the room. And I think that's important to acknowledge. We haven't solved this. We don't know who fought. We don't know where exactly. And we certainly don't know why it stopped.
No, we definitely haven't. We've just mapped the edges of the mystery. So let's try to recap what we've actually learned from this deep dive into the texto-colado files. We're looking at a war that stopped being discussed rather than being resolved.
And we've identified the mechanisms of that erasure. The inconsistent archives, the sudden silence from command, the refusal to acknowledge the human paradoxes. We see the symptoms of the cover-up, even if we can't see the face of the conflict itself.
And we know that this silence wasn't accidental. This wasn't some clerk losing a file folder. This took effort. It required changing records, denying benefits, rewriting the timeline. It was an active project.
Which leads us to the synthesizing thought here. In this specific case, history didn't explain why the conflict ended. The system failed in its duty to record the truth.
Or did it succeed?
Well, you could say the system succeeded in its duty to protect the state from the truth.
Which is a scary thought for anyone who likes to think they know how the world works. We trust that if something big happens, like a war, it'll be on the news. It'll be in the books.
This really challenges our assumption that visibility is inevitable. This case proves that it's not. A massive event can be buried if the shovel is big enough and the silence is disciplined enough.
So where does that leave us? And where does that leave you, the listener? Because I feel like we've just walked everyone into a dark maze and said, good luck. We can't give them a neat little bow to wrap this up.
We can't. But we can leave them with a perspective shift. When you look at the news or when you read history books, you look for information. You look for what is there.
Right.
This deep dive teaches us that we also need to look for what is not there.
To listen to the silence.
Precisely. Because in the case of this conflict, and perhaps others we don't even know about, silence is not the absence of information. It's evidence of intention.
That's something that's going to keep me up tonight. The idea that silence is an active thing. A weapon, almost.
It is the ultimate weapon of the historian, or I guess the anti-historian, to erase the question so you never have to provide the answer.
Well, on that cheerful note, I think we've taken this as far as the texto colado sources will let us. It's a frustrating place to stop, but I guess that's the point. The frustration is the evidence.
Indeed. The frustration is the only truth we have left.
Thanks for taking this ride into the void with us. It's been quiet.
Always a pleasure to explore the unknown.
We'll see you on the next deep dive. Until then, keep listening, even to the silence.